So we're going to get started with exercise 215 today. And I have to be honest, this is when VRay starts to get fun, I think. It's not quite all the way there in terms of environments, but this is the first time that we actually start to have sun and light and shadow and stuff that really gets exciting. But in the process, there are a few things that I want to talk through, and there's a change in the step-by-steps that I put on here because I modified some stuff before this class, between when I had this printed and when I decided to start talking to you, or when lecture started today. So there's a few things that are going to change, and I'll walk through those. The first thing is that I have two new materials that I just made up for you. The light skyscraper glass and the dark skyscraper glass. I made those, and we will use those as part of our materials today. Depending on whether you like the light or the dark, that's kind of the base place to start with. If you don't like it, you can do a different material. The idea behind these materials is that they do a couple things. One, they're very light on how much it takes to do the renderings. If it's true glass, you have to have two panes of glass, not just the one single surface. This one you can do with just one surface. So it's not really a true glass, but it's meant to fake it. And I also put in some frames so that it looks like individual panes of glass on your skyscraper instead of just a big glass box. And so I'll show you those a little bit later, but I wanted to point out that they were there. The other thing is that there is this SF Downtown 3DM for part 2 that you're going to need. It is a very large file. I think it's like 62 megs or something like that. So if you go ahead and click on it now, you can start the download process because it goes a little slow. Okay, so you go ahead and download that. What is it? 62 megabytes. But if everybody's downloading it at once, it takes a while. So since we're already there, go ahead and start downloading it kind of in the background, and we'll use it as we go forward. So I went ahead and I opened up my file from last class, which was my transformations of buildings over time. And I'm going to use this end building here as my final object, the one that I'm going to work with for today's purposes. And so I already spent some time organizing my files a little bit in terms of the skin and the floors and that sort of thing. I'm going to use those to my advantage. So I know that I want the skin, so I'm going to select those objects. I'm going to select the floors. So we'll select objects. I'm going to select the ceiling. We'll select the object. And I'm not going to select the extra curves. I just want the floors, the ceilings, and the skin of this particular building. At this point, I want to create a brand new Rhino file and put this into the brand new Rhino file to make things a little bit cleaner. So I'm going to go ahead and go to my Edit menu, not the Transform menu. I'm going to go to Edit and then Copy. And so this is a copy clip. It's clipping this to the clipboard, which then will let me paste it into a new document. Okay? So I'll go ahead and go to File, New. Yeah, we can save the changes to that. This is going to be a large object, inches. And then I'll go ahead and once it's open, I'll go to Edit, Paste. And it will then drop it into my building. There it is. I'm going to modify this slightly. Let me turn off the gumball too, because it's going to drive me nuts. Okay, let's convert this to shaded so that we can see it. And then I'm going to move this so that the corner point over there, right there, is at 0, 0. And then we'll zoom selected. And now I have a file that has just my building. If we look at my layers, we have the skyscraper layer, the skin, the floors, and the ceiling. Right? We have an environment with a lighting layer. I'm going to get rid of those two for now. I'm also going to get rid of default through layer 5. So that we have a very clean layer stack. Okay? We're going to use this building like we did previously in the semester as a block, and we're going to reference this down the road. Remember, the advantage of working in blocks and using linked files is that it doesn't bog down one very large file. And you'll see today when I open up the downtown San Francisco file that it's going to really slow down the computer because it's a very complex file. There's a lot of data in that file. And so by using references, we're able to kind of lighten the load a little bit. and we're not adding in all of these surfaces for this particular building. So before I move it, though, I want to spend some time and kind of get this set up with the materials set up correctly, etc. And so last class I was able to do the materials for some of the building. I did the concrete for the floors. I did the textured sheetrock for the ceilings. We should be able to see those if I turn off the skin here and I went into my rendered view, right? We should be able to see the concrete for the floors. We should get the white if we could see it for the ceilings, which is good. The texture mapping on these is not exactly of a density that is appropriate just yet. So let's go ahead and modify that. So I'll select all of the floors, select those. I'm going to go into my texture mapping, and we'll apply just the surface mapping to these. And I'm going to change the UVW repeat to, well, I don't know, maybe 10. And we'll have a look at this top surface. It feels a little bit better. Okay, it's not quite so large. Maybe we end up doing it a little bit more than that, but you know, that'll work. Let's do it a little bit more. Once again, I'm going to select all of them. I'll go back, and let's do it maybe 50. All right. So we're looking for something that's appropriately scaled for the building itself. The white texture ceiling I'm not so worried about. There's not a whole lot to it. It's just white. So I'm not going to deal with the texture mapping on those. Okay, so then we come to the skin. Okay, and previously I had loaded a Skyscraper skin, which I'd used before, but this skin or this material wants two surfaces. And so you'll see in step 2, I say to slightly scale out your building to give yourself an inner and outer surface. It's always bugged me that you had to do that. And so I spent some time and worked on creating a new material. The two materials that I created are online. It is a light skyscraper and a dark skyscraper. It just depends on the look that you're going for. If I click on the dark skyscraper, it'll download directly. The other thing is that they are available under the VRay textures, VRay materials library. If we go to glass, if we look far enough, we should be able to find it. Right? They're kind of buried. So the easier way is obviously to click on the link. So here's the two different skyscrapers, the light and the dark. They look very similar, right? But I'll show you kind of how they work when we get a little bit further along here. So I already have them loaded. I'm going to go to my materials library, and let me get rid of this so that I bring it in new. So let me delete, remove material. Yes. Okay. All right, so I'm going to go ahead and load that in. I'm going to go to load material, and I have this stored on my flash drive in my VRay folder in my materials under glass, and here it is. I'll do the light skyscraper for right now. Okay, I'll go ahead and open this up, and it's going to load the glass light. I'm going to right click on my material here, and I'm going to apply the material to the skin layer like that. Okay, and so I've done that, but it looks really weird in the rendered view, wouldn't you say? Okay, and that's because the texture mapping hasn't really been addressed just yet. And so we have this skin. If I go to properties and I go to texture mapping, I'm going to start with a box mapping for it. So we'll go ahead and apply a box mapping. We'll do a bounding box. We'll do a world. We'll do it capped. Okay, and so now it's been applied. It doesn't really look much better. Okay, and that's okay. We're going to work through it. So what I'll do is I'll select the surface again, and I'm going to show the mapping widget like I did before, if you remember back to that texture mapping thing. And we're going to look at what this looks like. Okay, so right now I have a box that represents the entire size of the building. Right? One of these units is designed to be just one pane of glass on my building. Okay, so I'm going to take this square, this mapping widget. I'm going to move this so that it's on one corner of my building. So we'll start right there. Okay, so it's just right there. And then I'm going to scale this in a couple different directions at once. So the first one I'll do is just a regular scale. and I'm going to scale this side of the map to be 4 feet. And by switching that down to 4 feet, right, I've identified approximately what the width of one of my glass panels would be. Okay? The good news is that it also scaled this direction a bit so that we're closer. I want this to be even in this direction as it is in this direction because I want my glass panels to be 4 feet on both directions. So we'll go ahead and I'll scale this time 1D for one direction, and we'll scale this mapping widget there to there is now going to be 4 feet as well. Okay, so it tightens up that. Now the last piece is that I want the floor to ceiling to be scaled as well. So I'll scale 1D, and my floor to ceiling height was 16 feet. So I can type this whole thing and we'll go to 16 feet. Okay? So it looks a little weird in preview format, though it does look better now because it's corresponding to my floors of my building. Okay? But you can see when you look at it that there's a piece of this that's transparent. Okay? For whatever reason, Rhino likes to display something that's solid in this material as transparent. So this will ultimately be solid. All of the divisions between the glass will ultimately be solid. But Rhino's preview shows it the opposite. Okay? So once I have that established, you can see that it starts to divide up and scale my building in an appropriate manner. It feels like this is a skyscraper. The panels are about the right size. Okay? So now that I have that established, the materials are done in this view. I'm going to go ahead and go to File and then Save. And I'm going to save this. We'll move it to today's, and we'll call it Exercise 215, sorry. And we'll say Building. Okay? And I'll go ahead and click Save. So now I have a file with just my building in it, with the textures and materials applied correctly, the texture mapping applied correctly. So I'm relatively happy with it so far. Okay? Now it's time to bring this into a scene to give it some more context. And this is the first time that we've kind of done it in this direction. But it's really important to recognize, especially right now when you're first learning this, that the geometry of your building, the geometry of your design, stays as its own file. Okay? So in this case, Skyscraper, it's its own file. Then we move this as a block, or we reference it into the final scene. The final scene is where the lighting is going to happen. So your building, your materials happens in one file. The second file is your scene, your background, plus your lighting. Okay? And so those two are going to stay separate for the rest of the semester, and you're going to keep referencing. Okay? It's a little confusing on the first try through, but I promise you it will make your life a lot easier when we get to the final. Okay? So I have this saved. I'm going to go ahead and go to the course website. You saw that I already downloaded this Skyscraper. It's a zip file. It's compressed in there. I already have it, so I'll just go ahead and just open it. I'll go to File and then Open, and I'm going to open SF Downtown. And there it is. It's a 64 meg file. And I'll go ahead and say Open, and we'll give it a second. Okay, so I have this file, and you can already see that as I start to work with it, right, it jumps when I try to zoom because this is a very dense file. Keep coming. There we go. So this is not a piece of San Francisco that I created. This was something that was done by some of the grad students at Berkeley a long time ago. All right? And it's been kind of held over and modified and tweaked over time. Some of the buildings aren't accurate anymore. New buildings have been added, buildings have been torn down, that sort of thing. But it gives us context for putting our building into an actual cityscape. Okay? And you could come up with a new cityscape. We could take it from Google Earth or something like that. But we already have this, so it's a good place to start. Okay? So as part of this, because it's hard to find a site and to deal with where your building goes or whatever, I went ahead and created a building site for you. And so let me switch over to my layers here. We have the SF model, and I also have the building site. If I turn off the model for a second, it gets so much easier to work with. And there's my building site. Okay, so I gave you a little poly surface right here. Actually, should only be a polysurface. There we go. I gave you that little piece so that we can find the building site. The other thing that I did is I set up a couple of views. So if you go to perspective 1 and perspective 2, they're both views down the street, right, at street level that will show your building. Okay? And I set those up for you so that you didn't have to try to find the right view, because it can be very challenging in this context to find the view. So there are two for you to do renderings of. So we'll go to set view, perspective 1. Oops, how about this perspective view? Set view, perspective 2. And they're both, looking kind of at street level at your building. You can see that there's that little blue pad that I gave you so that you can put your building on it. Okay? So I'm going to go ahead and turn off the model, turn off all that background information, right, and concentrate just on my building pad for just a second. Okay? I want to drop my building onto this pad. I'm going to go up to Edit, Blocks, Insert Block Instance, and I'm going to go find that exercise 215 building. Go ahead and say Open. All right, the defaults here are fine. I'll go ahead and say OK. But on this page, I don't want to embed it. I don't want to embed and link. I just want to link it. Okay, we want small file sizes for organization purposes. Okay, so I'll go ahead and say OK. It brings in my building. Notice that my building is skewed a bit. So we'll just drop it into place like that. And then we'll go ahead and use the move command there and there. And we'll snap to that corner. Then I need to rotate it so that it's in line with my building site. Okay? I gave you a base of 100 by 200 so that it fits nicely. Okay? And we could see the building, and all of that's great. If we switched into rendered mode, right, we'd see all the materials that I had applied to the building, which is what we want. I'm going to switch back into the shaded mode for right now. Right? I'm going to zoom out a bit, and I'm going to go ahead and turn on the SF model background. Okay? Remember, as soon as that's on, everything gets slow. Right? Well, we're going to talk about a way to make it faster in a little bit, but I want to concentrate on the rest of the setup before we get there. Okay? So I have my building in the scene. It's a block reference. I have all this background stuff. I want the background stuff to have some kind of a generic material on it when I do my rendering. And you have a couple options. You can try to do photorealistic backgrounds, right, where you're trying to take photos of buildings and place them on the building and texture map and that sort of thing. To me, that's an awful lot of work. We know it's a computer rendering. Why not concentrate on your particular building, in which case you make your building in color, make everything else in white, just as masses. Right? It's kind of like a study model. Okay? It can look really nice. So I'm going to assign all of this mesh material in the background to have a white, just a basic white. And the material that I like to use is a porcelain white. Right? It already is loaded in this SF Downtown. I made life easy for you. Okay? If you didn't have it loaded, we could go to Load Material, and we could go into your flash drive, your resources, your VRay materials, porcelain, and there it is, porcelain white. Okay? I like porcelain white because it has a little bit of shine to it. You could do a white plastic, just not quite as nice looking. Okay? So I want to make sure that that porcelain white is applied to my SF model layer. Oh, come on. It's being challenging. All right. It's going to go on SF model. Say OK. And we should see it listed there. That's good. We can see our other materials listed down here. That's good. The building site currently has no material on it. That's fine. Right? I could apply the porcelain white to that as well. Apply material to layer. Let's go ahead and put it on the building site layer. There we go. Okay? So I now have the background material applied. I have my building ready, but my environment is still not set up correctly. Okay? So this is kind of the big thing that we're going to start with today, and that is that we're going to actually pick a date and time to do the rendering, and we're going to establish that. And so I'm going to walk through, and I'm doing this slightly out of order. I'm not going to do the proxy object, which is step 6 in part 2. I'm not going to do that until a little bit later. I'll do that at the end. I'm going to skip forward and go to part 3, And I'm going to follow VRay 8.17, which is the sun, to establish the sun into the scene. Okay? Let me zoom in here a little bit. So I see my building. Okay, so I'll start with creating a layer, and I'm going to call that layer environment. And you don't have to have this set up as layers, but it's going to make your life easier long term if you get in the habit of establishing layers. So I have an environment layer. I have a sub-layer for environment called sun. And I'm going to create my sun and put it on the sun layer. Okay? So up here in the VRay toolbars, there's a button with a yellow ball that says sun underneath it. Okay? This is an actual sun that's going to go into my scene. And so when I click on it, it brings up this sun angle calculator. And if we knew the location, we could calculate out the time of day and all that stuff. That's too much work, right? I'm going to uncheck manual control. And I'm going to scroll down here. And we're going to set this, we're going to find place for San Francisco. So there it is listed, San Francisco, California. I'm going to select it. And once it's selected, I'll scroll back up. And you see that I have a date and time. So my year is currently 2016. Okay? My current date is today, the 5th of October. There it is. And we have under time, we have the blue times, which is obviously in the middle of the night, and we have the yellow times, which is during the day. So if I move the slider to during the day, for example, you'll see up here on the sun position that the sun position and the height in the sky changes depending on the time of day. Okay? So I'll go ahead and pick a time of day. And again, this is arbitrary for what we're doing for today's purposes. I would say stay away from noon. Pick it on the shoulder. You know, when the sun's starting to go down, we'll get longer shadows. It'll be a little bit more dramatic. Okay? The other thing is we can choose to have daylight savings on or savings off. Okay? Right now, daylight savings is in effect, so that shifts our overall time by an hour. So those are both on. Once I'm done setting up the time of day and the year and the location, okay, I'll go ahead and say OK. I'm not, however, done with the sun. I still have to put the sun into my scene. So it doesn't exist as an object just yet. Very frequently I see people do this, where they've picked the time of day and everything, and then they ignore the next or last step in this process. And that is that we have to put it in. I could put it at 0, 0, 0. For my purposes, so that I can come back and find it, I'm just going to stick it on top of my building. All right, so we'll stick it right there on that corner. Okay? And we get a little light. It looks an awful lot like a directional light. Okay? Just because the light is small doesn't mean that it's not a powerful sun. All this is uniform light coming from one direction to the other direction. So it's not going to be a spotlight or anything like that. It's a big light applying in that direction. If I was unhappy with the position of the sun, if I wanted it not to be pointing in that direction, I can go back after the fact and modify the sun. If I have the light selected and I go back to my properties, click on light, I can click on the first button here for modify sun, and I can come back in. Now, unfortunately, it converts over to manual control. If I uncheck manual control, I have to go back through the same process of typing in San Francisco, coming back up, turning on daylight savings, adjusting my time, and I could, for example, pick a time that was in the morning. Okay? When I'm done this time, it will just update my light, and you see that the direction of the light changed, okay, for a different time of day. Okay, so now I have the light, or the sun, inserted into the scene. And if I were to do a test render, let me go back to my perspective 2 render here. Right, we're going to be able to see the sky through this render a little bit. And so if, let me make this small so that we don't waste too much time. Okay, it's already small. If I were to do a render, okay, we'd note a couple things. Number one, and I know it's still going, but we can talk about it right now. Number one, it's really, really bright now. Okay, that's because the sun's on. And the other thing is the sky is completely white. There's nothing assigned in the sky. So we have to fix two things. We have the sun, but we don't have a sky system yet. So there's two parts to having an environment, the sun and the sky. Okay? And the other thing is it's too bright, so we have to fix that too. So I'm going to close this for now. And we'll start with the sky. So I'm going to go to my VRay options. And again, this is written out in VRay 8.18 for sky. I'm going to go into my VRay options, and I'm going to click on environment. And you've done this before, and you've changed the sky color before, maybe. Okay? I'm going to go ahead and instead of changing the sky color or the background color, I'm going to click on this M right here, and I'm going to assign a sky. So this looks very familiar to our normal texture editor, but instead of picking a bitmap or anything like that, I'm going to scroll down, and I'm going to choose texsky. Okay? Once I choose texsky, under the default sky options here, I have sun. It says none. Well, that's not right. I need to pick the sun. And so the sun is actually listed by the really long string of numbers. Okay? And I know that's kind of weird, but that's the identifier for the sun. So I pick the long string of numbers, and I go ahead and say OK. And so I now have a sky for the lighting conditions. Okay? I need the background for visually what we see. And there's a reason that the skylight and the background are two different things. Okay? When we look, let's say we walk outside, okay, and this is a perfect day because it's nice and sunny. Okay? We walk outside. If we look at, say, the shadows that are cast by the tree, you can still see things in the shadows, right? You can still see details in the shadows. Okay? It's not pitch black. And that's because there's a lot of other light that bounces off of the environment that lights the scene besides the sun. So we have the all-powerful sun shining in, but we also have reflected light off of the sky, off of the clouds, off of the trees, whatever. Okay? So we need the reflected light, and that's represented by this skylight value. That's the reflected light. What we see, or the background, the blue sky, for example, right, is this background value. So we want that to be set as a sky as well. So I'm going to click on the M again, and we're going to come down here and pick texsky right there. And I'll pick my sun, which is the long string of numbers, and I'll go ahead and say OK. So now I have both a reflected light, or a skylight value, and I have a background value. So I have those two things established. So I'm going to get a sky. Okay? The last piece, though, is remember the scene was too bright. It was really white. Okay? Well, as soon as you introduce the sun, when we do renderings, we have to assume that we need like a camera, like, you know, take your phone out and take a picture, right? VRay works the same way. We need a camera, and we need to mimic having a camera with an exposure. So you guys all remember, or a lot of you that took 135, remember we did the digital photography stuff, right? And I talked about exposure and shutter speed and those kinds of things, maybe, vaguely. Okay, we're going to do that in VRay too. So there's an option for camera that's listed, and I'll open that up. And if we go to the part that says physical camera, we're going to turn it on. So I push the checkbox. And there's really only one thing that we need to adjust, and that is the shutter speed. So the default value is 300. It's probably going to be pretty close. Okay? We'll see when we do the rendering how it is, and it'll take some experiments. We have other options. We could adjust the aperture of the camera. We could adjust the film speed and that sort of thing. For the most part, in the world of VRay, all that really matters is the shutter speed and that you turn the physical camera on. Okay? So it's on. Our shutter speed's at 300. I'll go ahead and close the options now, and I can do another render. Okay? And so before I get too far into this, I'm going to go ahead and save this. So let me save as, and I'm going to call this SF Downtown Final Scene. And we'll go ahead, or Master Scene, it might be better. And I'll go ahead and click Save. It takes a little while, big file. OK, and then we'll go ahead and bring up VRay, and I'll click the render button, and we'll give it a whirl. So immediately in this render, you see that it's not nearly as bright anymore. right? So our shutter speed is working. We can also see right here, as it's filling up, that we're seeing a sky color. It's not white anymore. So we'll let this keep going a little bit. And you guys will see that as we do more and more VRay with more and more high resolution images, that there will be these breaks where I have to wait for VRay to actually do the render. Okay, so as it's finishing up, we can see, and again, I chose to make this a relatively small rendering, but you can see that there is sky color that's being applied here in the background. So right there, right there. Oh, this is actually a reflection. That's the sky in this little gap. Okay? So let's do another rendering from a little bit further away in the hopes that you'll be able to see this a little bit better. Oh, sorry. Didn't mean to right click. There's a reason that I established the views ahead of time so that you didn't have to do this. There we go. Okay, I was trying to get a bit of a view where we could see more of the sky. Okay, so in this context, we're matching the time of day. We get kind of, if we were looking out over the sky, you see at the horizon, it's closer to white in color. It's a light blue. The higher up we go, the darker the blue gets. We're getting the same kind of background here. Okay, our light is so low in the horizon that we're getting a little bit of orange at the very bottom, but it's compensating. If I switch the time of day with the sun to be at noon, the lighting would be different, or the sky in the background would be different. Okay? So we can then see what's going on. You can see the background. It now has context, and we have nice shadows being cast, etc. Okay? So our goal today is to get a rendering out, right, that has our material applied to it, that has our building applied to it. Okay? I told you that I'd come back to part 6 of step 2, and I would do this at the end today as well, after you get your first rendering. And that is that because this can get so chunky, right, when you have too much data in your file, VRay allows us to create a special object. It's called a VRay Proxy Object, and the VRay Proxy Object basically renders as a whole object, so we see everything, but displays as just a few triangles in Rhino. And so VRay goes and gets the file and adds to it. And it can make working in Rhino much more pleasant. There are two problems with this. Number one, when we make this proxy object, it's completely destructive and will destroy your original object. Okay, so that can be a problem. You have to be aware that that's going to happen. And number two, you can't see your whole object anymore. It's just represented by a few fragments of triangles. So if, for example, you were trying to establish a view through one of the city streets of your building, you would be completely guessing where the streets are because you can't tell anymore once it makes it. So I'm going to go ahead and show you this process so you're aware of it. Okay? So what I can do is I can come in, I can select all of this background. So I'm going to go ahead and select the objects, the SF model. Okay? Then I'm going to come up here to the VRay toolbar, and you see that there's kind of a tree-looking icon. That tree-looking icon is the proxy object. And so if I right-click on the button, it's going to write the proxy, the VR mesh file, the proxy object. So it's asking me where to save it. I'm going to save it on my flash drive or in my OneDrive here. We're going to put it into today's, if I can click on the right folder here, into today's folder. That is so not where it's supposed to go. I'm sorry. Sometimes your brain just shuts down in the middle of stuff. Okay, so we're going to call this the SF Downtown Proxy 2, because I've already done Proxy 1. Call it Proxy 2. Okay. Notice the save as type is a VRay mesh file. I'll go ahead and click on save. Okay. It's going to confirm that that's the name of the file. I want to export all the selected objects as a single mesh file. That's correct, right? Go ahead and automatically create the proxies, warn me for the existing files if I was overwriting it, and then I can also set a triangle count. This is how many triangles are going to represent this object in Rhino. Okay? So even if I went to say 1,000, I'm still not going to get that accurate of a representation. So I'll go ahead and say OK, and it will look like Rhino's going to crash, and sometimes it does crash. Okay? I'm going to leave this kind of going, and I'm going to jump forward because I already did this once today so that I could skip the wait. And I'm going to open Rhino again, I hope. Right? And I'm going to load up the object that has already created, where I've already created the mesh, so that you can see the contrast. Maybe. Like I said, it might crash. I guess that would be the third problem with proxy objects. So, well, I thought I could open the second Rhino file, but it's going to take a little while. So what I'll do is I'll pause the recording for a little bit. You guys can start working on your texture mapping of your skyscraper, and then I'll come back and show you the proxy object at the end so you can kind of make sense of it. So I told you I would come back to what the proxy object looks like afterward, after it finished. And so we went from, if I can get to the correct one here, right? So this was the exact same view that we had before, where we had the whole city. Okay, the city is now represented by all of these triangles. When I go to render, it will appear as if all of the triangles are still there, or all of the geometry is still there, but it's a whole lot faster to work with, etc. So it's nice from a speed standpoint. You can't go back, you can't take these triangles and put them back into the city anymore. It's a permanent change. But whenever you go to render, it will render out. So I like to present it as an option. There are a few times where this is really, really useful. If, for example, you're putting in a bunch of grass in a field and you want that grass to just appear over and over again, instead of making a really heavy Rhino file, you can use a proxy object and copy and paste the proxy object. But I at least like to introduce it as a concept so that you can see that it's there. I'll go ahead and let a rendering run in the background so you can see what this looks like and how the proxy object will come back. I'll also go and laser cut some sample topo, and then we'll glue it back together. Hopefully somebody here has some glue and I can borrow. I'm getting a few nods, so that's good. And I'll show you guys how to put it together.